Good evening, Crime Crunchies. Thank you so much for joining me. I am your host, Courtney C., a 27-year veteran of the media, and I am so happy to be able to bring you Crime Crunchies. We are going to be diving into another episode about Nancy Guthrie tonight. I was thinking the other day, we are starting to see some patterns in the media with all of the legal experts, law enforcement experts, retired detectives, et cetera, that have been making the rounds. And we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern of some agreement on things. And so I thought, you know what, let me put together an episode where we take a look at the things that experts are agreeing on and maybe some things that we still aren't sure. And again, all of this is speculation as usual, because we won't know until we know what exactly happened to Nancy Guthrie. So good evening, Sarah. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to share my screen, and as usual, while I'm doing this, please make sure to subscribe if you can. I would love that. It's free. Just subscribe, comment, turn on the notification bell, and all those good things. And this is a no super chat, no super sticker zone. I don't want your money. I see a lot of YouTubers out there these days shilling. I don't want to do that. I don't like that. I do this because I want to do this, and I like spending time with you guys. So we're going into ChatGPT. I'm very transparent. I use ChatGPT. I call it Chad because you know what? It makes things easier, and I want to share information with you. So this is one of my resources. I asked it a question today. Even though we do not have exact facts, can you share what most television interviews with law enforcement, retired detectives, etc., agree on with the Nancy Guthrie case, such as most interviewees agree that the ransom notes are bogus, etc. Excuse the typos. I just type really fast. I don't care. And I have to note that ChatGPT, my little friend Chad, is only going to give us things that they think are facts. It doesn't like to make stuff up. So let's see what it has to say that experts are agreeing on. So based on the interviews I've seen reported in mainstream media, comments from retired FBI agents, former prosecutors, forensic experts, and law enforcement updates, there are a handful of themes that are repeatedly coming up. These are not proven facts, of course, but they represent areas where most commentators seem to converge. And again, a lot of these things I absolutely agree with, and I do feel like we're all kind of coming to somewhat of a consensus. So, number one, most experts are skeptical of the ransom notes, and I completely agree with this. Whether or not any of them were real is the question. I think that there are probably at least the two that Savannah mentioned that could be real, but they weren't handled in a regular manner in which ransom notes are typically handled, in that there was no proof of life, there were deadlines with no communication, and sending them into TMZ and a Tucson TV station is not how it typically is handled. That said, not everybody dismisses every note. Some commentators have noted that certain notes allegedly contained details not publicly known, which is why investigators continued examining them. And for the most part, the items that seem to be alarming, Harvey Levin shared while he could not read the ransom notes he received, they were alarming in the detail, and there were things that were alarming to him, but only somebody in the home would know the placement of her Apple Watch, etc. This one is very obvious. I'm not even going to spend much time on that. Most believe Nancy was abducted from the home. And the only time when there may not be consensus on this is if people believe that she never even made it home. And technically, that's still on the table. There are people who still think that, let me change my little screen here. Oopsie. There are still people who feel that the family is involved. We have talked about this. I don't like to focus too much on it, but I mean, I still have to leave it on the table. even a little bit more so than I have in the past. Okay. I brushed it aside, even though I kind of left it in a spot and would think about it on my own. I have discussed it a little bit more publicly. Again, I don't want to hurt the family, but there are a lot of things that are concerning. And maybe this is the unluckiest family to have had certain things happen, be the last ones to see Nancy, have some odd things happening around that time. And I certainly empathize with the family at their loss, absolutely. And if they are not involved, I certainly would never want to hurt them further. But again, we still have to somewhat consider the family until we know what ends up happening. And I heard another podcast today that talked about the FBI. The FBI's modus operandi is they will get the case like 90% done before an arrest is even made. And while I've argued in the past that if it's a family member, they are the lowest hanging fruit, there's no way they wouldn't have already done their perp walk. If the FBI is leading this investigation, which honestly at this point, I really think that they are, even though Nanos isn't going to admit that, if the feds are leading this, then they could be getting this case 90% ready to go to trial before they even make an arrest. While local law enforcement are typically, they'll get 40 to 50% of their case built with the evidence, and then they'll make an arrest. Feds, they even go further. They're like ready for trial almost, the way they get things buttoned up. So again, they have a lot more information that we know. All this is speculation, but I do feel like we're kind of coming to consensus here. All right. So again, most people think Nancy was taken from her home. I absolutely believe she did. There's blood on the front porch, and they know that it's hers. Some people have argued that the blood could have come from her maybe pruning some thorny plants. It could have been there already. Nobody has talked about how fresh the blood was. We have no idea about that. So if there was blood at the home before, it's not a lot of blood. But if she's a bleeder and we thought that she was on heart medication or maybe blood thinners that she needed, I'm thinking Eliquis, that's a life-saving medication that you have to be on, or other types of medication that she needed to be on. Maybe the blood was already there. We don't know the freshness of that. And some people have, posited that maybe it was something from her doing plants and that she never got home. So I'm not going to really lean that way, but it definitely is something that we need to consider. So we're going to assume that she was home. So at this point, many experts are not thinking this is a sophisticated criminal organization. We could kind of rule that out as well. We're not thinking a cartel situation. We're not thinking the South American theft groups at this point. Definitely thinking that this is a targeted abduction. Many experts think the original motive may not have been ransom, and I absolutely am along this line. And I know a lot of my viewers that join me regularly, hi Joe, definitely are in agreement of this, that the ransom notes might have gone out, but were they red herrings? Were they insult to injury? A lot of my theory that I've spent weeks talking about is that the family knows maybe not the name of who took Nancy, but who took Nancy, because I theorize that there was a lot of previous communication from somebody that was masked digitally, and that I'm thinking it's a revenge or retaliation. Okay. And this person wanting retaliation, sending those notes in a very highly publicized manner, adds total insult to injury, especially if somebody thought that Savannah could have thought she was better than them, and having a very public kidnapping of her mother and then having these highly publicized ransom notes going out to a station she used to work at and TMZ is in your face could be seen. I don't think she felt humiliated because of them. I don't think that is the feeling she would have had in this situation, considering she was dealing with the trauma of her mother being gone. But I definitely think that there is, just that having something like this happen and then having it happen on not a national scale, a global scale, adds a completely different microscope to this situation. So I don't think that money had anything to do with this. I don't think a lot of you think money had to do with this. I definitely think this has to do with emotional trauma for sure. And of course, many experts are in agreement that Nancy may have died very early in the crime. And this is a faux pas by the stooge who took her. This is one of the bullet points we're going to talk about as well. But the person who took Nancy was supposed to have taken care of Nancy. At least that's what we assume. And whoever masterminded this obviously underestimated Nancy's medical condition, any medication that she might have needed, plus the fact that it appears that Nancy Nancy resisted is the right R word I'm looking for. We believe she resisted at the front door and had some sort of a physical altercation with porch guy / stooge. And that was the beginning of the end for Nancy. And we just have to think that, she was spunky right up until the end. But I think, of course, at this point, everybody is pretty sure that whatever suffering she had at the hands of these people is over with, which is, in my opinion, it's a godsend. So we're thinking that she would have died either from the assault that occurred, which we don't know about. She could have had a medical event from not taking her medication, or, several things. Okay. She's 84. So lots of things that could have happened. So most experts do not think investigators are focused on only one suspect. So unlike some controversial cases where law enforcement locked onto a single person early, public statements from the sheriff have consistently emphasized ongoing forensic testing, digital evidence review, and multiple investigative avenues. So we've got some PIs hired by the family. And again, while I definitely think that that is a good idea, I don't know, my gut is telling me that the feds, at least, if not local law enforcement, I have to believe that the feds may have a bead on somebody. And again, they're going to be very quiet. The feds are not going to talk, unlike Sheriff Nanos, who has a big mouth, which, be what it may. I have not been a big, I haven't really been a big fan of Nanos. I'm sure most of you are not either, but at least he does talk occasionally. I actually have an article that I'm going to go over where he talks, and he did give some information at the very beginning that I think was premature, but it was information. Things like people asked, how did the perpetrator get into the house? And he wouldn't answer that. He talked about the family did drop Nancy off at the house, but then later backtracked it. I think he referred to Tommaso as dropping Nancy off, but then later went back to family. But he did give some information, a lot more than we have right now, and that's what's leading everybody to do, a lot of guessing. So the closest thing to a current expert consensus was likely abducted from her home, was not a cartel. It was something other than kidnapping for ransom. And I don't really like these answers. I said, okay, I need more. Share me some other topics on Nancy Guthrie where the media agrees. Like Savannah could have been the nexus. And this is where I want to go, because I thoroughly believe that Nancy was taken because of Savannah. It's the very first thing that her brother Cam said to her. And she was immediately fearful. I've had a viewer say that law enforcement who were first responders stated that Annie immediately went to kidnap. So people knew that there was something going on. So I'm like, Chad, come on, you got to give it up. You need to be a little bit more specific. So it did. It let me know that Savannah, and this is according to Chad going in and scraping the interweb with all of these different interviews, that law enforcement and interviewees are saying that she absolutely was most likely the target. Nancy herself was not known to be wealthy or publicly visible. Savannah is a nationally recognized television personality. A criminal might assume her family had access to substantial money. The ransom demands appeared aimed at family resources rather than anything connected specifically to Nancy. Several commentators have suggested that the offender may have selected Nancy because she was perceived as the easiest way to reach Savannah. And I absolutely think that if you wanted to hurt somebody, this is a great way to do it. And, you know, if somebody wanted to take Savannah down a notch or two, this definitely is a way to do that as well. Most experts believe the offender knew something about the family. In the very beginning, a lot of the, and I don't want to call them pundits because that's more political, but most of the commentators were thinking that this could have been somebody who worked at Nancy's house, had, been around the house, and that Nancy was the target. But I don't think that's the case. I think it was pretty easy for somebody to have been able to find Nancy's home. I don't know if there's some connection somewhere, but I remember Jennifer Coffindaffer mentioning that, and I'm not sure what tool she used for this, but apparently there's some tool where you can go and look at like most common Google searches or keywords and find out how many people Googled keywords. And Jennifer Coffindaffer used this tool. And apparently before the kidnapping, there were Google searches, something to the effect of, what is Nancy Guthrie's address? And so somehow Coffindaffer was able to see that people were Googling Nancy Guthrie's home address right before the kidnapping. Now, I was able to find her home address because people were literally camped out for a month in front of her house. But I can't imagine that I'm going to type in a celebrity's mother and be able to find the address. So again, I'm not certain how easy it was before this to find that. So I can't speak to that, but I guess you could have figured that out. I don't know if the dark web makes it easier or if you pay one of those, finder searches, search engines. I'm not sure, but originally a lot of people were thinking that this had to do with Nancy, but at this point, again, as this is a recap of where we think we are right now, most people are definitely thinking this has to do with Savannah, and Savannah is the nexus and not Nancy. And, it wouldn't be very hard to have found out that Savannah's mother lived in Tucson, considering she just had that segment last year where they all sat down to lunch together. And I'm not my usual setup. I'm not at the Crime Crunchy layer. So I'm going back and forth and I'm looking for your comments. Hello, Joe. Thank you so much for joining me again tonight. All right. I don't have my second monitor, but we're going to get through this. So multiple offenders are considered more likely than a lone offender. And while we've had some folks come out and say that there's only evidence of porch guy, and they don't want to speculate that there is a second or third person, it just doesn't make sense. I still feel like there's at least a driver. Porch guy was driven to Nancy's house, and porch guy would have had to have driven away from Nancy's house with Nancy. Okay. Um, he most likely would have had to have carried her, even though she was, not a big woman. When somebody is potentially unconscious, which we don't know what her state was out the front door, there is a bit of trail of blood that was going onto the rocks of the driveway, the circle driveway. There definitely had to be a car. And if the front camera did not pick up a car, and again, we don't know what other video footage there is out there, which is one of my bullet points I'll talk about next. We definitely think that there might have been a walkie-talkie in Porch Guy's pocket, and it would make sense that he would have used a walkie-talkie rather than a cell phone or even a burner phone to have reached out to the driver. But there definitely was a car, and it might make sense that he had a second driver. Although the only evidence we have right now that we know about is there's one person. So I don't know. I still think that most people are saying there's more than one, although there's at least one person or two commentators that think that there's only one. But I would say majority are saying there's multiple offenders. So, we definitely have more video that we know is out there. And I think that the consensus is that there is definitely more video. And at this point, we have an update from Michael Ruiz where there's more tech gadgets that will be used or are being used right now, and that there are thousands of hours of camera footage. We are not exactly sure what that means, but we have to think that we were shown just a brief segment of Porch Guy coming up to the porch. There has to be more. There has to be video of them leaving with Nancy, and maybe there is video of a car pulling through the driveway. Maybe there is. Again, we don't know. Is there enough that they got a car? This guy seems like he was smart enough to have gotten past at least getting past the FBI in the first 10 days, because the FBI did not release this video Porch Guy until February 10th. So 10 days in is when the video was released, and they were asking for more information. So we have to think that maybe there's more information that they're not asking us. And again, I am so happy that that hopefully things are moving along. I do feel like they are. So again, the Porch Guy may not be the mastermind. And I think that most people, he looks like an idiot the way he's moving. He looks like a doofus and a stooge. And most people are not impressed with his intelligence level that he's just giving off with his body language. And so it does feel like if there is a mastermind who has put this whole thing together, in my theory, that Savannah had been, and I don't want to say obsessed in a sexual manner, but maybe a fixation of somebody who had wanted something from her and that she ignored, that perhaps Porch Guy is someone who was just paid. Again, on the dark web, you can get a lot of stuff done that's not nice on the dark web. And, it used to be with Craigslist. I think that there's probably a dark web type of Craigslist where you can search for somebody who is willing to, steal or rob or kidnap. You probably can find that on the dark web. It's really sickening, but it's true. So, we feel like the Porch Guy, everyone feels like he's local. Again, if you're going to get somebody to do a crime, you're not going to have somebody with travel expenses. And I'm not really trying to say that tongue in cheek. This is a very serious matter, but we feel like maybe this is someone local. Some people have talked about, whether Porch Guy is a man or a woman. I personally think Porch Guy is a man, but in our last conversation, when we talked about the way the ransom notes were written out with the good grammar and just the wording that were used in the phrases that were released, I don't know. I kind of felt a feminine energy to those ransom notes. And again, we have only heard, hearsay on what the ransom note said. I really would love for them to release more of the ransom notes so we could get a little bit more of a flavor of the person and get an idea of who might be writing them. But, this is talking about theories involving a small group rather than a single offender. And I definitely think, I would not be, let's just put it this way. If I found out that the mastermind behind this was a woman, I would not be blown over surprised. I would not be blown over surprised. And I mean, I don't want to flash names around, but I've had people reach out to me and I haven't even researched this, okay? And again, this is my show is about conversation and ideas, okay? I don't like going down rabbit holes and I don't like conspiracy things, but I've had some folks reach out and just email about a female who might have been pushed out of, and I'll just put it this way, the Olympics. I think that there was a female involved with hosting or commentating on the Olympics that had been pushed out perhaps by Savannah or by the powers that be that put Savannah in. Not going to say her name, but because I mean that would definitely get me sued for sure. But let's just say that there was somebody, a female who had, we'll just say in general, females can get really catty, okay? I mean, I've done volunteer work with women, and women, if even on a good day, can get super catty. So, I mean, is there anyone, and let me know, is there anyone watching right now or in the replay that if the mastermind was a female, is there anybody who would be surprised? Or do you think that it is possible that maybe somebody chose to do this in all the planning? Because we all know that there was recon as early as January 11th, and this person, whoever did this, pulled out all the stops. So I'm just really interested to hear if anyone else has thought that maybe a female could be behind this, or if I'm absolutely just have gone way off, okay? Which I might be. And again, I'm open to anything. I'm open to hearing. I'm open to thinking, and it might not be right, and I might change my mind, but I think we have to consider everything at this point until we get more answers. So, of course, the offender may have badly miscalculated what would happen, and that's exactly right. I mean, to the point where there have been some commentators who have mentioned that Porch Guy may not even be alive anymore because he screwed this up. And if this was a real ransom situation, there was no one to give back in order to get that money. And if these are really, really, really bad guys, there are bad people out there that have no problem taking care of the situation, and there's also been a lot of talk about this ransom, or not ransom, the reward, the $1.2 million reward. I want to address that again because I keep forgetting to bring it up. People are like, okay, why has the reward not been claimed? And I think that there could be a few reasons. First of all, if this is a one man, if Porch Guy is the only guy behind this whole thing, Porch Guy is not going to turn himself in for the reward, he's not going to get the reward. Okay. So if there is only one person, they're not going to claim the reward. Okay. Another thing, snitches get stitches. Okay. If you do have a take on who is behind this and you are fearing for your own safety, you may not tell on somebody. Snitches get stitches. So if you really know what happened, you may not turn somebody in fearing for your own life. Okay. And the safest way to ensure that nobody knows your secret is to be a lone assailant. If you're the only one doing this, there's nobody to know your dirty little secret unless you share it. Okay. Now, a girlfriend may know that her partner has done this, but she's not going to turn him in. And it is usually not until they break up, and it could be years later, that the girlfriend or wife or ex-wife gets pissy. And then if they are unhappy with that person and they want revenge, then they tell the cops. I mean, how many shows have you seen where the girlfriend is brought in, the current girlfriend, the current wife is brought in, and she is the alibi, and she's like, no, he was home with me the whole night. He couldn't do this, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? A year down the road, they're broken up, and all of a sudden she's like, well, guess what? I lied. He wasn't home. I knew what he did. Here's where the body is. Here's where the weapon is. Blah, blah, blah. So, it could take an ex becoming an ex before the reward is going to be taken. The other reason why I don't think the reward has been helpful is they say it can be anonymous. It's not anonymous. Give me a break. Okay. The way that you can collect a reward and be anonymous is when you call in your anonymous tip. You don't have to share your information, but what people don't realize is that when you give a tip to a tip line, whether it's local or FBI, the tip has to be what is either convicts the person, is a clear enough tip that it's very clear that it was your tip who got the person convicted, arrested, whatever the threshold is that the tip commission, determines is the winner of the tip lottery. Okay. So how is that done? After legal paths have been followed and the person is either detained or arrested or convicted or put away behind bars, there is actually a commission of people, a board of people who sit down and identify if there was a tip given by a person who then deserves the reward. So an actual board of people have to vote on whether or not your tip is what, allowed justice to be served. And then they thumbs up or thumbs down whether you even get that reward. And then once they determine your tip is the winner of the reward pot, if you were anonymous, then you are given, however they are able to communicate with you, they give you a code that then you can go to, like a post office, a public place, and you give them your code and say, I'm an anonymous tip person and you now owe me $1.2 million. And then they hand you a bag of money. But in the meantime, there's probably 50,000 cameras in the area. So what people don't realize is getting these rewards is not an easy thing. It's not like I call in a tip And I know it's a good tip because it's my ex-boyfriend who did this, and I have the entire lowdown, the means, the method, the motive, and the location of the weapon and the body. And then I think I'm going to, in 1 week, be given a big, huge cardboard cutout check of $1.2 million with balloons and a ticker tape parade. That is not what happens at all. There is a entire process that has to happen, usually after the arrest and conviction of the bad person. And there's a lot of reasons why people are not going to get or go after the reward. You know, I was silly enough to think that once the family put the $1 million reward up, I'm like, oh, damn, this guy is shaking in his boots. I think the term I used was he's pooping blue Smurf poop right now because he's so done. This guy is so done. Once you put $1 million up, 1.2 million, his best friend might turn him in. You know? And no, it didn't happen. And it was, I think, a month in that they put that reward up. And I'm like, wow, this is going to turn the tide. At first, the video, February 10th, we saw the video of that guy. And I'm like, oh, this guy's shaking in his boots. He's so screwed. And then nothing happened. And then they did the reward. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy's so screwed. He's going to get turned in. Nothing. Crickets. And it's just, what in the world? And it was at that point, I think we all thought to ourselves, what has happened? What in the world has happened? So anyway, getting back to this, the offender badly miscalculated. Everybody agrees that he's a stooge. So most experts think the case will ultimately be solved through forensics and not a confession. And this just goes into, you know, kind of what we were just talking about right now. No one's going to confess. This person was smart enough to have, that we know, kept his tracks clean. Okay. Do we have real DNA? I don't know. Do I have a lot of hope in this DNA? Actually, I don't. I really, really don't. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a half glass full kind of person. Okay. But after Glovegate, I'm hoping that law enforcement believes that the DNA, I'm thinking, because everybody is focusing so much on this DNA and talking about this DNA and hanging on this DNA, that they know enough of the crime scene that it would be DNA of the perp, of Porch Guy, only because they have done their diligence and they've gotten buccal swabs of anybody who would have been in that house. And I think that they've done a lot of, footwork getting that done. And so whoever this is somebody that isn't matching anybody that should have been in that house. Okay. The surveillance, Nanos, he's such a goober. He says they've got thousands and thousands of videos. I don't know that they have thousands and thousands of videos. I'm thinking he's meaning thousands of hours of videos, but we're going to take a look at the map again tonight as well. I think about this map. We're going to bring it up in a little bit. We don't know exactly about where the map came from. So I'll just leave that for later. So we're going to talk about the map. Surveillance review of, cars that left the area at a certain time. And we know in the neighborhood, in Nancy's neighborhood, there were no cameras. But once you get out of the neighborhood and you're on like a main drag, there are going to be cameras. So I can't think that it's going to be that hard to look at any cameras along these paths in and out of this neighborhood. Yes, there might be several, but they're all going to come up to maybe one or two or three main streets. Okay. The house neighborhood itself was a labyrinth, but the way to go in and out of the neighborhood, you're probably going to hit one or two or three main drags. And it's going to be just, you know, going up to those places at those intersections, looking for license plate readers, cameras. They probably do have a ton of evidence that they're reviewing. I get it, but they have a small window of time that they would be looking, and there can't have been thousands of cars at 3 a.m. in Tucson in that one area. So, I mean, I have to think that, again, they might have a car, and they have. So I did not know this, and this is something a little different because we don't have a gun, okay? But they have, like, CODIS is a national database for DNA. They have an entire database for ballistics. So if you have a weapon that is used and you've got casings in Tucson and you have the forensics with the ballistics go through it and they photograph everything, I guess they upload ballistics into this national database. And this national database then will match that ballistics evidence with weapons used in other states across the board. And so I know that they have also facial recognition software. If you go into Walmart, that was one of the things we were hoping for originally, was Walmart Wrangler had purchased his things at Walmart. And I have to think that the car at that time, you know, between 2:30 and 3:30 in the morning being picked up, and they've got software that can identify vehicles. They can, you know, go in frame by frame, pixel by pixel, and maybe pick up something unique about the vehicle or a license plate. So again, there's so many things that could really help identify this person, and we're just waiting. And I think we all pretty much agree that it's going to be through some sort of digital information. And this one is just pretty obvious. Many experts believe there is a critical piece of information that has not been released publicly, and I think that there are many pieces. Disagreement about the ransom notes. Yeah, we think that most of them are bogus, but Savannah seems to think that at least 2 of them are real, and I do think that she was being honest in 95% of that interview with Hoda. And I think that was one of the things that she was being honest about, was the ransom notes. So some of the things that the experts are agreeing on, this is not a typical stranger kidnapping. Again, we do feel this was a targeted abduction, and folks are starting to think that this could be retaliation or revenge, which is absolutely what I feel. Most experts believe the camera tampering was deliberate and important. You know, was he trying to hide the camera because he was looking or talking to someone inside? Was he waiting for someone to bring Nancy out? Was he doing that because they knew they were going to bring the car around? Those are some of the questions, but either way, he was trying to shut that camera off. One of the other things that we forget about is one of the first interviews that Nanos did, one of the first things he said before people shut him up, is that there was, I think, a floodlight that was knocked off the back of the house. And I have to think, why was a floodlight on the back of the house knocked off? We know that the doors were positioned open with flower pots, but it seems to me that there's something in the back of the house, and there's a camera that has mentioned that it picked up movement in the back of the house, but it wasn't very clear. So I think that there's more answers with what was going on in the back of the house that we just don't know. Okay, believe the offender made mistakes. These are pretty obvious. I was not happy with Chad with his answers here. This one is very true. Most analysts think the offender never expected national attention. However, if the offender is the same one who sent the ransom notes, I don't agree with this actually, because anyone sending a ransom note to TMZ wants national attention. So I'm not sure if I agree with Chad. But if the kidnapper is not the one who sent the ransom notes, then they probably were freaking out at how big this went. So that I can understand. I'm checking to see. Yes, they changed plans. Yes, thank you, Joe. All right, I'm looking for questions or comments. So I do think that this makes sense if the kidnapper is not associated with the ransom notes. The person that sent the ransom notes wanted attention. They wanted attention more than they wanted money. So I'm going to move quickly through this because I don't agree with Chad on that. Okay, most experts think law enforcement knows much more than the public. This is where Chad is just getting really boring, in my opinion. Most experts believe the crime scene itself is the key. That's very obvious. The gloves are potentially huge evidence. I don't know, but the only thing I can think of is the glove with the slobber, the glove with the hair. Did he leave a glove behind in the house? We don't know. And again, they don't expect cartel involvement. And then the ransom communications. And this is why I definitely wish they would release more of the ransom notes, because people can identify people they know by how they talk and write. I think that, and this is why I think that the feds know pretty much who they're looking at. And the reason is they have not, since February 10th, when they released the few seconds of the video of Porch Guy, they came to us and said, can you help us identify this person? We need your help. This is how they always start out. We need the public's help. They have a press conference. We need the public's help. And then they released the video of Porch Guy. I think they have a suspect in mind. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if they didn't, like we're going to read some stories tonight where they don't have a suspect. Brian Enton says his contacts say there's no suspect. But if they didn't have a suspect, they would be baby bird feeding us more stuff. Here's additional footage. Here's a picture. Here's a portion of the ransom note. Can this help you identify anybody? Please call in the tip line. That's what they do at month 4. If they don't have anybody, they're coming to us and asking the public for more help. My opinion. Okay, I just have to think they do. Most experts think somebody besides the offender knows something, and that is true. How many times did Savannah say, if you've seen somebody change the way they do stuff, if they're acting paranoid, if they're not going out in public, if they're staying inside, if they're hiding. All right, so there's the end of that. But I started my own list, and I just want to go over it really quick. And make sure that I didn't skip anything. I started writing this out and I'm like, nah, I'm lazy. I'm going to have Chad do it for me. Okay. So let me see what we've got. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I think the activity in the back was prep for entry into the house. I think they definitely entered through the back, and that does definitely make sense, especially with the floodlight going. Let's see. Thank you for all your time and effort to keep the story going. I don't think we have a true timeline. All the info is based on the family being truthful. And you know what? That is very true. This is like that Hulu did that documentary, like I think it was called What Happened in Apartment 603, where the girlfriend was home in the apartment alone while her fiance was down at the gym, and he comes back and the door's locked and she's stabbed in her head 23 times. And the only thing the police know is what he reported on. And in this case, we only know what the family said as far as dropping her off. That's the only information we have, which may be bad information. So I agree with that. All right, let me get rid of that. Stop screen. All right. I'm I'm on the one person perp because that's all we have seen on camera. Only a few saying one. You drunk turkey, Jim Clemente, Cheryl Mack. And that's very true. We only have evidence of one dude. So, the rest is speculation, and speculation just makes an ass out of you and me, right? Let's see. The people involved have no feelings. You're right. They are psychopaths. No emotional attachment. They're psychopaths. And this guy, he didn't care. He's just making money. So, and the pacemaker, this is what's interesting. This is why I'm going back to this map. Okay. So we also are not aware of, let me go back to my screen. And every time I do my screen and turn on a screen, I ask people to please subscribe. So I'm going to ask you to subscribe. We looked at this a while ago. Okay. So now this is a map that Nancy Grace originally had on her show. And I'm only quoting Nancy Grace because at CrimeCon last week, she talked about this again, and she doubled down and said, this is a map that Annie Guthrie shared in a neighborhood Facebook group. And the premise of this map is that this is a potential path that the person used to leave the neighborhood. That is what Nancy Grace has said, that this is a potential path that Annie Guthrie gave that the perpetrator could have used to leave the neighborhood. And this was one of the first pieces of evidence that showed me that they know who took Nancy, because how else would you know where the driver went? So many ways to get these streets right here are the neighborhood. This is all desert with no street lights. You have to weave in and out. You could have gone any way through these streets. If you're trying to avoid cameras, you could have taken, and you probably can't see my mouse, but maybe just imagine you could take any of these ways and go left. You could go right. And she's got them coming out and making a right on this street. And how would she know he went right instead of left? Now, after I did this episode and covered this map, somebody commented that this isn't a map of the perp leaving and a potential path. Somebody said this is a map of places where Nancy would go, like this nail salon or Bash's is a grocery store. But Nancy Grace, again, mentioned this map as being a potential path where the perp left. So this is what made me think about this map again. We don't know really what they've got of the pacemaker. And I had no idea the pacemaker had any signal for the signal sniffing, okay? The signal sniffing that they were able to do. So what if we know that her Apple Watch was left behind because her pacemaker disconnected from it. I'm just talking through this now, guys. What if they were able to see where she went until this point on her Apple Watch, because maybe the connection with the pacemaker, and maybe at this point, this is where it disconnected. Because we have a time when the pacemaker disconnected with the Apple Watch. Just go with me. I'm just diarrheaing that's out right now. Okay. What if the pacemaker disconnected here at Bash's and we were able to get a GPS route from the pacemaker on the app on the watch? Because this is a really weird way. And as I go down in these comments, there are some local people that wrote, and I read a couple other ones, still no local would travel that way, too many residential roads and not the most efficient way to get to either place. There are several comments that are saying that a local would not go. Here's one. I heard about this route that she sent out to her neighbors, and a YouTuber, JLR, drove the route completely. It is another way to get out of the neighborhood where Nancy lives without being seen by cameras or at an intersection going to the main road. However, I did not hear about something. This is another 83-year-old. Let me see if I can find another comment. There were several in here where people said, I'm a local and this is not a regular way to leave. This is not how a local would leave her area. So what if we don't know much about it? Okay, pacemaker disconnected from Bluetooth in her house or just outside. It'll disconnect after, which is what I thought. You know, just like if you have ear pods and if you go a certain distance away from your phone, your ear pods disconnect. And so that's what I thought, is that she was connected to the watch until maybe they started driving away in the car. That's what I originally thought. But does anyone know enough about these pacemaker apps? Is there any possibility that this could have been a route the pacemaker shared with anything? And I might be completely off. I'm just asking the question. Because this, again, this seems like a really weird route. And I'm not a local. I'm just asking the question. What if this route is an actual route that they had from something, some GPS, and that this is actual intel? Just asking it. And, you know, there are enough businesses along the way here that they would have a ton of camera footage. Because while this map is showing a few things, like here's down here, Circus 79 Salon, Nail Salon, Green Toes, North Massage or whatever, Bashas, Lulu Walker Elementary School, there's cameras. There's other businesses, gas stations and things like that. These that are just not labeled. But again, when you leave this neighborhood, this shadow where you see the first on the right-hand side, this is all desert with homes on like an acre. It actually would make more sense for them to have turned left down to East River Road and then go this way. This is a much faster way if they were heading toward Bashas or Lulu Walker Elementary School. And the way that they went up and down and round and around, I mean, this just, Anyway, I don't know. I might be making too much of this. But it just makes, I just went back to this. And I'm thinking, what if this is actual intel? And Annie she shared it, and then people said, no, don't share it. Blah. All right, so let me share another screen. We're going to take a look at some articles, some latest and greatest. Oh, look at him. Look at little Nanny Nanos. Isn't he cute as a button? Oh, look at his car. I love his car. Oh, I wish the top was down. Whoa. He's just so attractive. All right, so this is a article from, I believe, Michael Ruiz. Yes. Nancy Guthrie Sheriff defends pace of investigation more than 4 months into search. I think this guy is so clueless. I don't think he's running this. He's got great people. I think the feds are running this. He's not even communicating with the family, and everybody that I've watched that has talked about how odd, if Sheriff Nanos is leading the investigation and he has nothing to do with the family communication-wise, that is not good. That tells me that the feds are probably giving him lip service and are like, here's your sandbox, go play with your big toys. Here's your big truck, here you go. But that they're really doing it. I think they're really doing it. So this is what Michael Ruiz says. The sheriff overseeing the investigation into the suspected abduction of Nancy Guthrie blamed lab work, scientific protocols, and the judicial process for delays in the investigation, which entered its 4th month Monday. In an interview with local media this week, of course, it's not that he sent it to a lab that couldn't conduct the tests instead of taking the plane, the chartered jet from the feds. Yeah, you're right. They're the ones who delayed. All right. And this is quote, it's just not a detective goes out there, talks to somebody, and we can make an arrest. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos told Tucson-based KOLD TV, quote, this is a very sensitive case, but what really makes it prolonged is we do rely on labs. Detectives have relied on lab work for DNA and digital testing in particular, he said. Although the interview was published Monday, a spokesperson for Nanos' office told Fox News Digital he sat down for it several weeks ago. What? What are they sandbagging this article? This is old. I don't like that. This is an active and ongoing investigation, the spokesperson said. Forensic analysis of DNA and video evidence remains underway. And if and when there is a significant development in this case, it will be shared publicly. In a controversial move that stemmed from a public rift with the FBI 11 weeks after he sent hair samples from Guthrie's home in the Catalina foothills to a private genetics lab in Florida, they were forwarded to the Bureau's Quantico lab for more advanced testing. 11 weeks. He sent hair samples to the Florida DNA lab that could not even do and test the hair. So he should have sent it to Quantico. This is a mistake. There were also early reports of mixed DNA samples, which are difficult to isolate in ongoing digital forensic analysis, again, which the Florida lab could not handle. When you're looking, this is a quote, when you're looking at those labs and the work they do, you have a science there, and science has rules that it has to go by. Wow, that's brilliant. Nano said in his local news interview, even though it's not DNA, they'll tell you isn't an exact science, it's 99% plus. So it's pretty close, but you still have to follow rules. This guy, he doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense to me, what he just said. I think he just spouts words. It's like word salad. So he continues, if I were to say there's a positive to this, it is that people are working, okay, doing their best to stay within those rules so that they have the understanding that, look, nobody wants to arrest the wrong person, he said. We want to make sure that DNA doesn't just identify a suspect, it also exonerates those who are innocent. That is the dumbest thing. What an idiot. He doesn't know anything, guys. This tells me you can't tell. This guy has no idea what's going on. He just gave us total word salad malarkey. I'm not even going to finish reading this. This is all bull. Maybe I'm being dramatic. I don't know. What I just read to you, I lost IQ points. My IQ went down after reading his quote. He has no idea what he's talking about. He told us nothing. Okay, I have to get off this. I have to leave now. That is horrible. I apologize for reading that to you guys. All right, so I'm going to read another article. One that hopefully doesn't make me upset, because that was just a waste of my life. I will never get that minute back. Nancy Guthrie likely targeted by local worker who assumed family was wealthy, says veteran investigator. So this is Fox 10. This is the Tucson station. A leading forensic scientist who spent decades with one of the country's largest medical examiner offices told Fox News Digital over the weekend that she believes Nancy Guthrie may have been targeted by a local worker who assumed the victim's family had money. I think this is Barbara Butcher. Okay, this was at CrimeCon. All right, so this is a quote from Barbara. I find it flabbergasting that anyone would take a woman her age, but what I think is probably the case is that someone in the area, maybe a handyman, maybe a service person, had found out that Mrs. Guthrie was the mother of Savannah Guthrie and said, oh, she must be rich. Barbara Butcher said Saturday, speaking on the sidelines of CrimeCon Las Vegas, quote, so this person is not well. And I think we can agree with that. And, we have all gone down the path of a handyman. It's not off the table. Butcher, a longtime medico-legal death investigator and the host of Oxygen's The Death Investigator, also said the lack of a credible ransom demand raises concerns that Guthrie may have died shortly after the alleged abduction due to shock or an underlying medical condition, leading the suspect to hide evidence and vanish before the case could be resolved. Quote by Barbara Butcher, my second thought was that after time when there was no valid ransom demand or any information forthcoming, that it's probably likely that Mrs. Guthrie died of shock, fright, heart disease, whatever it was, very soon after being taken from her home, she added. And that's just horrifying to me. And so now this kidnapper had nothing and probably, unfortunately, took her body into the desert and buried her there. I don't even think he buried her. I think he just tossed her like garbage, unfortunately. That's my opinion. And I know that sounds cold, but I think they just tossed her. So families urging anyone to call FBI tips. So I don't know. I think that we were absolutely looking at a handyman. I think that we've gone past that, though. I think we've gone past the handyman. But I will say, if that is what it ends up being, I wouldn't be surprised. Because, I mean, that makes sense. That tracks. There's a meal deal. All right, last one. Last one, guys. We're almost there. You guys have stuck in with me. Woo! All right, sharing. Whenever I share, please subscribe. It's free. Please subscribe and hit the bell. Please hit the bell. Okay, Nancy Guthrie update. Car driver's careless mistake could lead to arrest. Now, this is from today, and this is an article I'm going to read. As the Nancy Guthrie investigation enters its 5th month with no updates on suspects, a retired detective has spoken about how a careless mistake made by the perpetrator could lead to the case being solved. Retired Modesto Police Department Detective John Bueller, who worked on the Lacey Peterson case, recently spoke with News Nation's Brian Enton, who has been closely following the Nancy case from the start. Bueller suggested the case could still be cracked, noting that newer cars have tracking capabilities. If somebody ever plugged her address into a Google search for a Google Maps or whatever, if they did a reverse keyword search on that, because those records are maintained for a period of time, to see any random person that would have typed in her address that had a reason to do it, and then you'd contact that person and find out, why did you put that address? Whoa, that grammar was a run-on sentence. So basically what he's saying is that, I hadn't thought about this, but when you put a Google address in Google Maps in your Apple CarPlay, there are records. And so if they download the brain of the car, if they get the car and they download the brain and they see that address was put in Apple CarPlay Google Maps, which syncs with your cell phone, folks. If anyone's ever put in an address in Google Maps and then you go plug into your Apple CarPlay and you hit search recent searches for your Google, you'll see that search even from your phone because they talk to each other. So then you're going to want to find out, I guess, that they can, I wonder if there's a way that they can do a reverse search. All right, this is me just brainstorming. This is going back to the keyword search tool that Jennifer Coffendaffer had referred to. So is there a way, again, once again, is there a tool out there, because Google is the big brain in the sky, is there a way to see who searched that address? And if it was done in a car, guys, what if that's the new tech? What if the new tech that we were teased about from Michael Ruiz at CrimeCon, right before he got on stage, he said that he had a contact tell him that the feds were going to be using new tech. What if the new tech is that with Google, who has been helpful because Google was able to go into the cloud of that Nest camera and they were able to get that video without a subscription? What if Google is able to find everybody who typed in her address and sync it to a vehicle? Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm thinking. I mean, that doesn't seem so strange, you guys. That doesn't seem like rocket science. What if the new tech is this reverse search? Because Google's everywhere. And if each car has a brain, and I know the car syncs with my phone, somebody, and I promise you, you could not have found her house without GPS. I promise you that. The addresses are not even, they're not even really visible. Let me close that McDonald's commercial. It's making me hungry. I haven't had dinner yet, guys. I'm not in the crime crunchy layer. I need to get food. I'm traveling for work. What if that's the new tech, guys? What if we just saved America right now? What if we all just now figured out? I think they had a high-tech jammer in a vehicle. Maybe, but that's not going to, I don't think a jammer is going to affect something that they typed into the car. And what if they thought by typing the address into the car GPS that they were safe, but they're not? I don't know, guys. I might have to think about this. All right. I know you're waiting for me to finish this lovely article. Now, before we go, I have a quick update on the Scott Peterson thing we were talking about in my last show. I wanted to update something on that. Oh, go
Now, at McDonald's, you can choose your study meal or even your drive-through dinner with much value.
Get a McDouble meal deal for $6, or make that a hot and spicy McChicken meal deal for $5.
You guys, I can't move my screen. Hold on. Let me refresh. Go away, McDonald's. Okay. So let me go on. Let me continue before another McDonald's comes up. Nancy has been missing since, okay, Bueller pointed out that car tracking could eliminate or target those with legitimate reasons for traveling to Nancy's address, such as delivery drivers, which we already know that they swatted what we think is a delivery driver. Like other criminal experts, he theorized that a local tradesperson or service worker could have been behind the alleged abduction once they realized Nancy was related to a wealthy television personality. Any tradespeople that maybe were doing plumbing repair or electrical repair, anybody who was delivering furniture, anything that came up where somebody could see her as a source of ransom because of the connection with Savannah and Savannah's notoriety. So here he's talking, the retired cop remained hopeful the case could be solved, even if it might take time. We had a random murder that went 11 years unsolved, and it was only solved because the one person that could give us the information was afraid to come forward, and it took 11 years for them to get over that fear and probably a breakup with the boyfriend. He also said the investigators might already have a tip that could break the case. It's just a matter of timing. When tips come in on a case like Nancy Guthrie's, they're prioritized as best they can, but you still don't know for sure if they're prioritized correctly. And so there might be something in there that we're waiting on that could break it wide open. Okay, so before I forget, I did a show on Scott Peterson because he's working with the Innocence Project, and there is a documentary coming out July 16th on A&E. It's a 2-night, 4-hour long documentary that Scott Peterson, there was evidence that wasn't followed. And one of the things I talked about in this case about Scott Peterson that Mark Garrigo said is that there was a robbery across the street from Scott and Lacey's house. Lacey was missing. She went missing on December 24th. And there are reports that the neighbors saw her walking the dog after Scott went to the marina to fish. There is a house that was empty December 24th through 26th that was burglarized, and neighbors saw a white van, and the van is associated with the burglars. Now, the burglars, when questioned, said that they burglarized the house on December 26th, 2 days after Lacey went missing. However, Mark Garrigo says that the house was burglarized on the 24th, and the van was never properly followed up. And he says that there's no way the house was burglarized on December 26th because media had already descended on the Peterson house as soon as they realized Lacey was missing. Now, I have to say that that could easily be proved that the burglary didn't happen on December 26th if what Garrigo says is true, because there would be some sort of footage. So I did some research, and sure enough, December 26th, media was converging on the street, and the Modesto police were executing a search warrant of the house on December 26th. Therefore, it is highly probable that the burglary did not take place on December 26th, like interview, and the police went, oh, okay, they robbed on the 26th, not the 24th, because Garrigo's theory is that these robbers, that Lacey went up to them, was a little spunky, and that they grabbed her and threw her in the van and took her, because the van was found days later on fire at an airport. Okay, so I did want to follow up with that. I know it's off topic, but because I saw John Bueller listed in this and he was associated with Lacey and Scott Peterson, I do have to add, I did do research, and the house could not have been burglarized on December 26th like the prosecution stated. I'm not saying Scott is innocent. I'm just saying tune into the documentary on July 16th and decide for yourself. Does every kidnapping involve a white van? Okay, I have to tell you, there's a lot of people selling merch at CrimeCon, and there was somebody selling t-shirts that had a van and it said something like creepy white van. The only thing I bought is this shirt. I'm actually wearing it tonight. It says for the children, and this is NCMEC, the National Center for Exploited and Missing and Exploited Children. It's the only merch I bought was for the children. And if you wanted to do something nice, would be for NCMEC to help children against all that stuff. So I'm done. I am done, you guys. I am coming back Saturday. I think noon is what I'm shooting for if things go well. I have another theory that a viewer has shared with me, and it's one that hasn't been talked about. It's somewhat similar with The Family Knows Who Took Nancy, but it's an interesting angle. And while we may not agree with everything, I do want to go down the road. It's worth talking about, right? Because until we know, we don't know. And I want to talk about it. And that's what I want to do. So anyway, I do appreciate everybody spending time with me tonight. I know I have a different show than other people. It's more conversational. It's less formal. And I appreciate you guys coming and just spending time with me. I really do. It means a lot to me. When I started doing this, I was literally talking to no one. There was no one listening. But I love you guys so much, my little crunchies. So I hope you all have the best rest of your week. And I will be back Saturday with a new little theory that I cannot wait to share with you guys. So until then, I will catch you on the flip side.